moving internationally, do they have families? Do most of them have families? Or?
A lot of them.
An international hybrid, and she spent up to the age of 12 in England and in Ireland. She actually taught for a decade in 3 different languages, which I barely get this one straight, so that's very impressive. In 2009, she became the CEO, and she managed over 20 consultants to help all of us with school placement rollout. So we all welcome Elizabeth there.
We are a group of education consultants, all of us former teachers. Most of us were in teaching for somewhere between 10 and 20 years, and then took that knowledge and transferred it to working with families who are moving, usually internationally, between school systems in order to counsel families on identifying the right fit schools for their children, and then accessing those schools, and then also thinking about how you eventually bring your children home again. Those last 2 presentations were great and gave me a million more comments that I want to add, I promise not, but some things to remember. By framing it a little bit, just explaining in a larger sense what the role of education in relocation is, and then sort of funnel it down to China. If you're sending a family, you're sending a family, and that whole unit is going to have to thrive. Preparing a family and knowing who the family is that you're sending, and I don't know how you do that as a company. You can say, well, I need to interview your husband or your wife before we officially offer you this, and by the way, is anybody, you know, a drug addict or an alcoholic or a... Imagine saying to your 16-year-old who has just fallen madly in love for the first time, you know, guess what, honey? You're gonna leave the football team and you're going to leave her behind, and we're gonna go live in Beijing. Telling your parents that they're not gonna see your kids for Sunday dinner. As I mention each hurdle, I'm gonna try to give a few sort of tips or a few tools to have in the toolbox in terms of how to address these if you are moving families there. I think it's really important if you're in global mobility or if you're in this world at all to sort of educate yourself on what the education landscape looks like wherever you are sending your families. So if you are looking at locations in China, what are the options? What are the waiting lists like? International education has become big business. There is this burgeoning business of international education. Do they have corporate sponsorship or debentures? Is that something that as a company you would consider? Vet them well. So, anyway, a quick wrap up. Remember the role of education. It's not an afterthought. We had a company call us once and say they had just sort of signed off on moving 14 families to Doha. And then, called the international school and found out they were all full. What were they going to do? Well, the household goods were already en route, okay? Be realistic, plan ahead. If you're sending somebody to Hong Kong, you're not going to have them there in 2 weeks. You're not going to have their children in school. It's going to take several months to get them in. And factor that in. We had one family that between when we started working with them and when we finished, they had gotten a divorce over this very issue. Do your research if you're in global mobility, and you know, I think sometimes the afterthought or the problems are just because who knew, right? Who knew that you had to fly a kindergartner to Hong Kong to interview for school? And remember that for families it's a big picture and long term. So I think I've probably just gone through the next 5 slides on one breath. Yeah.
Are you brought in more than 50% proactive, or is it reactive after it's already an issue?
We have a lot of clients who they're moving an expat, they call us in and we work with the family start to finish. I think that education services are tough to sell to companies, and it's hard for companies to understand why they need them. Because until they've had a problem, they're not going to see the need for it.